I decided pretty early on that I was going to need to find a different way of doing this, where motherhood and entrepreneurship weren't going to be in constant tension. I run 3 businesses, working only 16 hours a week, and that sounds impressive. But today, I'm going to talk to you about the truth of what's working and what isn't working behind my schedule. If you're familiar with 80-20, it is a principle that states that 80% of your efforts are only generating 20% of the outcomes, and only 20% of your input is generating 80% of the outcome. I really need to know exactly what that 20% is that's driving all of the revenue. Focus all of my 16 hours on the 20%, not do any of the 80%. And that really did make me a more focused and a more strategic business owner. I've gotten a bit of a reputation over the last 20 years of being the 16-hour CEO because I run 3 businesses, working only 16 hours a week. And that sounds very impressive. But today, I'm going to talk to you about the truth of what's working and what isn't working behind my 16-hour-a-week multi-business schedule. Welcome back to Better Way to Build. I'm testing some different content and directions for this podcast, and I wanted to do something a little bit different with this episode and talk through some of the practical decisions that have really shaped how I do business as an entrepreneur over the last 20 years and what I've learned, oftentimes the hard way, over those 20 years of entrepreneurship. And so today, what I'm really excited to do is pull back the curtain and share some of the things that I've never really shared publicly about the truth about being the quote unquote 16-hour CEO and what it really takes and what it really costs to run 3 businesses. So for me, it's 3 businesses in just 2 days a week, 16 hours. So I want to start by sharing a little bit of the backstory because, why 16 hours? What's the deal with that? And that all began actually about 16-ish years ago when I first became a mom. I was an entrepreneur right out of the gate when we got married. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since I was hustling friendship bracelets on the playground. Let's be honest. I am a lifetime entrepreneur. But I started my first legitimate business in college and was working that alongside a normal job right outside of college. Eventually got married and then eventually was pregnant with my first daughter. And pretty soon after her birth, so I was already running a side business. At the time, it was in wedding and portrait photography. I was already running a business when I had her, and I thought, how hard could this be, right? I'm just gonna bring this little baby into this awesome thing that I have going called entrepreneurship, and how hard could it possibly be? And what I found is that I was never good at living in both of those roles, mom and business owner, simultaneously. Okay. I know that there are women out there who can hold a baby on one hip, homeschool another baby to their left, and run a business, on their laptop at the dining room table. And that is not me. I think that is amazing, but that's not me. I don't know if I just can't multitask that well, but I found that what was happening in those years is that I was actually resenting motherhood. I wasn't resenting the clients that I had and the demands of the clients. I was resenting that I had this little baby that needed to constantly be fed and needed my attention and was pulling me away from the awesome work that I felt like I was doing. And man, it's sad to admit that, but I'm just being really honest with you about what that tension was. It didn't lead me to wish I wasn't working. It led me to resent motherhood, which was a role that I chose to enter into, right? I chose being a mom. But I just quickly found that it didn't work for me to do those 2 things simultaneously at the same time. And so what ended up happening is that I felt like I was really kind of missing out on the first year of my daughter's life because of the way that I was trying to balance those 2 things and my heart just being pulled in 2 different directions. And when I started to notice that I was resenting motherhood, that was a red flag for me, right? I wanted to be a mom. I deeply wanted to be a mom. I was very excited to be a mom. Like I said, I chose to become a mom. And so it was definitely an immediate red flag for me that I was resenting that role that I had chosen that I definitely didn't want to resent. And so I decided pretty early on that I was going to need to find a different way of doing this, where motherhood and entrepreneurship weren't going to be in constant tension, right? So at the time, and I'll have to tell my whole story in another episode. My husband and I are both entrepreneurs. There was a season of time when we lost jobs and ended up on food stamps. And, we were just in the early stages of starting business. That's a whole nother story for another day that I promise I will tell. But at the time that, I had our first daughter, Chloe, we were broke as a joke. Long story short, there were no dollars. And so 2 days a week of childcare was literally all I could afford. So when people ask, well, what was the origin of the 16 hours a week? The pathetic story is that 2 days a week of childcare was just literally all that we could afford. I had a family friend who was sweet enough to open up her home to do childcare. And I knew that it was going to be a really wonderful situation that Chloe was going to be really poured into. And it would allow me the chance to then have 2 work days a week where I could just sit at my desk and I could be 100% business owner without feeling the mom guilt of needing to be tending to a child. Which is why also, side note, I get a lot of questions about whether or not I feel mom guilt as an entrepreneur and a mom at the same time. And I can honestly say that I never really have. There are aspects of it where I realize the toll that entrepreneurship takes on maybe how present I am or just the things that I carry, right? The weight that I carry as a business owner that wouldn't be there if I weren't a business owner or multi-business owner. But in general, I don't deal with a lot of mom guilt because I just learned really early on that for me, I needed to separate those two things so that when I was a mom, I'm always a mom, but when the kids were at home, I could 100% be all in as a mom and not be pulled into work. And then on the days that I was working, I could 100% be an entrepreneur and not feel guilty that I was not simultaneously being mom. So I learned that I was just going to need to split those two things out. And so for me, that looked like I was working every Tuesday and Thursday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., right? So that's how I got my 16 hours. And I wanted so much to continue to live out who I am as an entrepreneur and contribute to the family's resources, financial resources, and that kind of thing. But I wanted the other 5 days a week to raise my kids and run my home. I actually really love and get a lot of joy out of taking care of a home. I wanted to have friendships. I wanted to be able to go on play dates and do like normal mom things. I wanted to go randomly walk through Target, I wanted to be able to have friends, do other things, take care of my home, and also still be a wildly successful entrepreneur. I mean, is that asking too much? Come on. What's interesting really is that what I discovered over time. So now I still maintain a 16-hour work week here 20 years later, right? I'm a little over 20 years as an entrepreneur. And the reason why, even though now I have kids that are in school, full time, so I could work a lot more hours of the week. I could work 5 days a week. But what I learned from those early stages of having to work only 16 hours a week or deciding to work only 16 hours a week was that those kind of intense, crazy time limitations actually were what made me a more successful business owner. All right. Those limitations of 16 hours a week were actually what made me a more successful business owner. I actually attribute sort of the really fast growth of my first company directly to those limitations. And that's because it forced me to apply the 80-20 rule. Now, if you're familiar with 80-20, it is basically a principle that states that 80% of your efforts are only generating 20% of the outcomes, and 20% or only 20% of your input or effort is generating 80% of the outcome. And so I got to thinking, man, if I only have 16 hours a week, I don't have time to waste on the 80% that's barely moving the needle from a revenue or business development perspective. I really need to know exactly what that 20% is that's driving all of the revenue, that's driving all of the business growth, and find a way that I could focus all of my 16 hours on the 20%, not do any of the 80%, do only the 20%. And that really did make me a more focused and a more strategic business owner from day one. And so, like I said, that has just stuck now, not out of force, but out of choice, because I saw the impact that had on business growth, on revenue, on even just the overall stress level of the business, being able to focus on the 20%, knowing what the 20% is, and focusing just on that because I forced myself to in those 16 hours a week really, I think, was a catalyst for growth and not a limitation for growth, which is completely countercultural. So here we are, 20 years later, I still only work 16 hours a week because I just want a lot out of life, I guess. I want to have personal home days. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of what my week looks like. So right now, I still work 16 hours a week, and I currently run 3 businesses. And what my week looks like by choice is that number one, I want a slow start to the week. I want to have sort of what I would consider a personal or home day on Monday where I can do the meal planning and get the house cleaned up and kind of decide on what needs to happen this week, just get organized. I'd rather do that on Mondays than do that on Sundays because Sundays, I want to be just hanging with the fam and having fun. I don't want mom to have to be doing all this stuff to prep for the week while everybody else is chilling. So I decided that I really want Monday to sort of be my personal home transition day, and I wanted a slow, organized start to the week. So that's what I focus on Mondays. I work my full day on Tuesdays still. I'm very intense about those work days. Like my phone is off. I don't get any notifications. I am like literally, unless the house was on fire, I am like at my desk, super dialed in. No distractions, no exceptions. But Wednesday then is for me really for friendships. I do some ministry work. I lead a women's business leader group here local in Tampa on Wednesday mornings. I'm usually grabbing coffee with somebody afterwards. If I have any kind of appointments, normal things, go to the dentist, that kind of stuff is happening on Wednesdays. So I leave Wednesday as sort of just like a buffer personal day for myself. It's a really good moment of oxygen in between 2 like super intense work days, Tuesday and Thursday. So I love my Wednesdays. I cherish my Wednesdays and they're just kind of open for me. I keep a lot of margin on white space. All right. And then Fridays, I want to have a date day with my husband. We're both entrepreneurs and it was years and years and years ago when we were actually in ministry, we were church planning, which meant we were oftentimes working all day on Sunday. That an older, wiser gentleman said, well, if you're an entrepreneur and you can afford yourself this freedom, I would suggest you take Fridays off as a date day, just commit to that. And so we started taking Fridays off as a date day years and years and years ago. Actually, while the kids were still little, when they were at home, we called them Family Fun Friday. And we would take Fridays off and just spend it as a family since Sundays would be kind of taken up. So we've been taking Fridays off since forever, what feels like forever, at least since we started having kids. And we still do that. So we go, Fridays are date days. Graham and I go to the gym, we go out to lunch. Like we just have a really chill day to ourselves until we have to pick up the kids from school. So the 16 hours of work have been spaced out differently depending on the season. Like there have been seasons where I wanted to just do a little bit of work each day. I felt like there needed to be a touch point, right? Depends on the season of the business and what the business needs, the season, what the team needs. So there have been times when I've taken those 16 hours and I've split them out over 3 or 4 days. But for the most part, what's worked the best for me is when I can just really deep dive on 2 days a week, which obviously probably brings up so many questions about how in the world do you do that? And how do you prep your clients and do people get mad at you? And I'll try to answer some of those questions in this, but also maybe in future episodes. But just know that it has worked successfully for 20 years across multiple businesses. But let me get into that, So what I really want to do in this episode is I want to give you a peek behind the curtain and talk about what is it that is working about that for those of you who either have a business but would love to work less in it. And you're like, Shay, I have one business and I don't even understand how I could work 16 hours a week in it. I want to hopefully open up some possibilities for you. I want you to get curious about what could be possible and maybe give you some ideas. But then I also want to warn you about what you may have to sacrifice, what can go wrong. And for those of you who are maybe potentially wanting to add additional businesses to what you do, I want to kind of just be very honest with you about what it has cost me, because there has been great gain and there has been great cost to running multiple businesses in 16 hours a week. And so that's the conversation that I want to have today. There are three basic things that are absolutely critical to business growth if you're a Christian entrepreneur. Number one, you need the mentorship of high caliber women who are ahead of you in business. Number two, you need mastermind level collaboration, strategic collaboration with other ambitious, values aligned peers. And you need the truth and the strategies and the spirit led insights that God has for you. If you don't have these three things in place, I just want to invite you to check out Illume Network. Illume is a faith-based entrepreneurial network for 6, 7, and 8-figure Christian female entrepreneurs who are looking for that kind of high-level mentorship, strategic collaboration with peers, and kingdom business strategy to guide their business growth. If you are building something meaningful and you're done doing it alone, I hope that you'll head to illumenetwork.com to learn more and consider applying, because this is the room that you have been looking for, and I would love to see you there. Let me give you a little bit of an overview of the three different types of businesses that I own, because I think that matters. So the company that I've had the longest, over 10 years now, is Elevate Visuals. It's a styled stock image membership for female entrepreneurs. I was a commercial photographer by trade, shooting for big brands, doing product styling and commercial photography. And years and years and years ago, and multiple business names ago, because it's iterated over time, I learned to basically create a membership where female entrepreneurs could get access to really, really high quality stock imagery for marketing their business, right? So that is Elevate Visuals now. It still exists. It's a beautiful photo membership for pretty much any industry you could be in as a female entrepreneur with a primarily female entrepreneurial audience. And we just supply those marketing images. And I am no longer the lead photographer. Obviously, we work with contributing photographers from all over the US. They're phenomenally talented. And it is a membership model. Okay. And I have a team associated with that. And I'll get into team a little bit more later. Second business I have is I actually own a wellness Airbnb. This is a newer sort of passion project of mine. We started it, we might be almost near the 2-year mark, 1.5 years. It's called Wellness House Tampa. And it is a stunning property here right in the heart of the city. But it is for the wellness and biohacking enthusiasts like myself. So it has sauna and cold plunge and red light and PEMF and all of these wonderful wellness modalities. It has this gorgeous, stunning, well-lit yoga studio, 3rd-story wellness studio, cold plunge out on a 3rd-story deck. I mean, it's so much fun. And I really did that out of needing a different project to work on. I'd been working only in Elevate for, like I said, over 10 years. And I really just wanted something else that I could put my creativity behind. And so Wellness House Tampa, you can look that up on Instagram at Wellness House Tampa. So I run a wellness Airbnb, okay? Totally different industry here. Now we're at STR, STRs. And then the third business that I own is Illume Network. So that's the newest. I started that in January of 2026 this year. And that is a faith-based entrepreneurial network specifically for 6, 7, and 8-figure Christian female entrepreneurs. It's made to compete with entrepreneurial organizations like C12 or EO, entrepreneurial organization. So that's sort of my newest project. But I have also at times within all of that, if you want to call this another company or not, done coaching, sort of life coaching, business coaching, where I've had coaching cohorts. I've done a few of those in the past as well. So I've had my hand in a lot of things, and those are sort of the three things that currently make up my 16-hour work week. So what's working? Let's start with the positives. All right. What's working about running 3 businesses in 16 hours a week? One thing that's working is having a team from the very beginning in each company. The reality is there are very few businesses, and I will tell you the exception in a minute. There are very few businesses that you could run in such a small period of time without a team. And they exist, and you can do really well, and you can keep a nice, tight, small business that is really just you. But for what I wanted to do, especially with Elevate, there was no way that I could be the photographer plus the CEO plus the, operations developer. There's a whole tech SaaS side of that plus customer service. There's no way that that company could just be me. And so I had to have, even back when it sort of started with me in commercial photography, photography, I really did need to begin to build a team from the very, very beginning. And I have some kind of team support in each of those 3 companies. I don't run any of them just by myself. So what that forced me to do, knowing that, okay, I'm only going to be in this for, let's say if we're splitting the companies, 5 to 6 hours a week per company, if you want to split it totally evenly, which it's not split totally evenly, but let's say you needed to split it evenly. What that did was force me to know exactly who I would hire so that their being hired would produce more revenue in the company. It made me have to get very strategic about that 80-20, like I said early on, like knowing exactly the 20%. The 20% of work, the 20% of effort that was going to generate the 80% of result or revenue. Most entrepreneurs have no idea what that is. All right. Most entrepreneurs are just doing a lot of things to feel busy, hoping that it all works, not really sure how to measure the results of each of these different things. Like, I don't know, I think I should be posting on Instagram, but I don't really know how to measure whether that's a worthwhile use of my time. Or I think I should be in email because then I'm interacting with clients, but I don't really know how to tie that directly to revenue. So most entrepreneurs are just doing a lot of work, makes them feel busy, and they're hoping it's all revenue driving. If I'm only going to work in these very, very, very limited hours, I have to know exactly what is going to produce the revenue. And then I have to be super disciplined to focus just on that and say no to everything else. And so having the time limitations and knowing that I was going to need some kind of team support forced me to really be strategic and clear around how exactly this activity is going to drive revenue and how exactly bringing in a team member to do that is going to produce at least 2x what I'm paying for that team member, but ideally more than that. It just forced me to be very clear, not just hope for the best, but really know how a team member was going to increase revenue. And likely that's generally going to happen from how a team member frees up your time. A great book for that is Dan Mertel's Buy Back Your Time, where he really talks about how to do exactly that, buy back your time so that you can produce more revenue, because most likely you as the founder are doing the primarily revenue driving activities. That's what you need to be doing. It's just generally that you get busy doing a lot of other stuff, and that's why revenue slows. So that's a great book for that, Buy Back Your Time. But that all of those kind of forced parameters, like I'm going to have to do this with a team, I'm going to have to do this in just a few hours a week, really forced me to do that with a lot of intentionality, do that hiring. So Elevate has the biggest team, and then Wellness House just has a very small team. I've got property managers and I've got somebody doing social media and marketing for that. I actually have my 16-year-old daughter doing that. And then Illume Network is right now primarily just me and one community support person, critical role for me within building of that community. There's no way I could do any of these things myself in just 16 hours a week. Maybe the Wellness House, I could do that alone in 16 hours a week, but everything has needed team. So what is working is having a team and doing that from the beginning and just building it in a way that could support that. All right. Number 2 of what's really working, we've already kind of hit on this a lot, but it really, having now multiple businesses still really forces me to 80-20 in each business. So it forces me to know exactly what's going to produce revenue and what isn't, and just do that. There is just not time for anything else. I can't underscore that enough. So adding in more work in those hour limitations has forced me, it's been a forcing function toward making sure that the work that I am doing in each of those businesses is really strategic and is very specifically revenue driving. Okay. And then third, I would say another thing that's working, and really this might just be a personal thing, but having, after spending at least 10 years building and growing and running in just one company, right? Elevate, which again had other names early on, but like current day is Elevate Visuals. After doing just that for so long, I really personally needed the variety. It was after a bit of a burnout season, and I'm sure I'll talk about that on some episode. I ended up taking 6 months off of work completely, pulled out of the company. This is Elevate for 6 months, and my team ran the company, and I brought in a business partner. at the same time. And I was able to take a 6-month sabbatical. It was after that sabbatical that I realized I really need to use other parts of my brain. I really need to get passionate again and kind of find some activities, some entrepreneurial endeavors that I'm really passionate in, and allow me to just use other skill sets that I have, right? Like I was in one thing for a very long time, and I knew that there's other things that I was capable of and that were life-giving for me. So for me, the variety is good. I tend to be somebody that likes variety. I'm like not your girl that can eat the same meal every week, Mondays for spaghetti, Tuesdays for hamburgers. I'm not your girl. I like do a recipe 3 times and then I need to move on from it forever. So I'm just a big variety person. Variety is very life-giving for me. So to that extent, and again, we're going to talk about the fallout of that, but to that extent, the variety was really good for me. And it just has been very life-giving for me to have different types of businesses that I'm working on. Okay, so that brings me to what is not working. All right, and we'll just title this subsection Things to Consider Before Starting Another Business. If you are like, wow, this sounds awesome, like let me add another business to my portfolio, I want to just warn you by being really honest about the consequences or, choices that I've had to make in order to run multiple businesses. Number one, just being so honest with you, I am really struggling with how mentally divided I am. I'm just really struggling with it. It is hard to only work 2 days and to jump in and out of 3 different businesses on those 2 days. And maybe partially because these businesses are so different that to be really doing deep work, let's say I'm content writing for a Loom, like I'm writing a Loom curriculum or I'm writing a podcast episode, and then to have to stop and go to an Elevate meeting, or I'm like doing deep work on Elevate, but then I have to stop and run over to the Airbnb real quick because, there's some issue over there and it's local to me here. That's hard. It really just is a lot. It makes deep work hard to do because everything's being broken up into these little 60-minute segments, maybe 90 minutes max. And like I said, it's especially hard if I need to tend to multiple businesses in the same day. I have tried separating them out so that, let's say, when I was splitting those 16 hours across multiple days of work, I would try to make like Monday's Wellness House Day and Wednesday this and Friday this. Those wouldn't have been the days because y'all know how I run my week. But I think I was doing Monday, Tuesday, Thursday at the time. And I tried to kind of separate them out. But the reality is it's very hard to have a business that you're only touching 1 day a week, right? There's Slack messages, there's meetings that can only be scheduled at certain times. It's just not quite that simple. I will say you can batch out deep work. So if you have a deep work block, I can assign which business that deep work block is going to belong to, and I can really focus on that. So Monday, I can have my deep work block could be focused on this business. And then on Tuesday, my deep work block could be focused on this other business. And that has worked. Like to the extent that I've tried that has actually worked. That has made it a little bit easier. But just in general, if I'm just being really honest, it's just hard. It's hard to be split in those 3 different directions all the time. And there's always some kind of problem somewhere, right? That's entrepreneurship. Like we get really good. Our whole job is just solving problems. So then multiply that across challenges across 3 different businesses. And it's just a lot mentally. And that can pull me away as a wife and a mom because there's just more to think about, right? It's more to fuss over. There's more to problem solve for. So I am struggling personally right now, real time, being honest, struggling with how mentally divided I am. Number 2, if you have multiple businesses, you need more people to make that work, which means more leadership needed in order to do that well. And leadership needs time spent on leadership and potentially less time spent on the work you love. What's beautiful about bringing in a team is that it does free you up to use your time in other ways, but a good team requires good leadership. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there. I hear a lot of stories, especially from contractors who work for other entrepreneurs, and it's really just very disorganized, or roles are very unclear, or expectations are very unclear, or KPIs, there aren't KPIs, right? There's just not a lot of accountability, and there's not a lot of clear role distinction. So it's not hard to poorly run a company of employees, but I love leadership and I really love excellence in leadership. And so I'm the one that reads all the business leadership books and really tries to execute on a high level, even if I only have a small team. And it does take time to do that well. And I have not done that well in every season. If I'm being honest, there are some seasons where I did a lot better than others with one-on-ones and with coaching and team development and things like that that are really needed to do it well, right? They're really needed to create a beautiful place for people to work where the time is effective and there's growth and you're able to give it what you love. So just know that bringing on a team is not kind of a magic pill to business growth. It really does, if you want to do it well, effectively, make good hires, see growth from that, then it is going to need you to grow as a leader. And it's going to take time invested in building a team and an org structure where everyone is thriving and the company is thriving. It's a lot of work. Leadership is a lot of work. It's a whole nother area of expertise that's needed. And it will pull you away potentially from the work that you actually love doing, right? Maybe that's actual client fulfillment or the coaching work that you love or the writing work that you love or the design work that you love or whatever it is. More team equals more leadership. And I will say, I was going to say this earlier and then I got sidetracked. It is possible to run a business in minimal hours a week without a team. My husband would be a great example of that. He runs a multi-million-dollar company where he is a coach and a speaker and an author, and the amount of work needed to make it run is probably 4 to 5 hours a week. And he has done that with one VA, and that is it, working, just a few hours a week. So there is absolutely a way to structure your work, especially if you are, he is a coach, a podcaster, like I said, author, speaker. He's found a way to do it where he's working very minimal and does not need a team. But depending on the type of company it is, there just might need to be more team involved, so the contrast to that is Elevate, which just needs a lot of different types of people in seats in order for that company to run. So it really does depend on what your specific business model needs to make it effective. Maybe you need a team, maybe you don't. If you don't need a team and you can work minimal reduced hours, then I would say go for that. I mean, Graham is just very good also at 80-20ing what he's doing so that he's literally only doing the 20%, right? And I just can't underscore that enough. So just know what doesn't always work is that the more people you need, the more leadership is needed to do that well. And the more time will be spent on leadership instead of maybe the work that you love. And that has been hard for me over the years. And I'm still trying to find that balance. All right, so that's number 2. Number 3 is, and this is a big one. I'm just going to be super honest with you about this one. I don't think I've ever really talked about this before. Running 3 companies in 16 hours a week means that, for me at least, I cannot speak for everyone, but for me, I am still, 20 years in learning how to be an entrepreneur. None of them are as profitable as they would be if all of my effort was focused on any one of those businesses, right? None of them are as profitable as they could be if that business were my only business. And I think that's just common sense, right? All the things that we've talked about. If I could give 16 hours just to one thing, even, especially if I'm doing the 20%, if I can give just one thing all of those hours, if you know what to do, right? If you know your 20%, then that can produce really exponential profitability. Now, if you don't know your 20% and you just fill it all with the 80%, that's kind of taking up your time, but not producing results, then, working on one company isn't really doing any good because you're just wasting a lot of time. But since I know the 20%, I know what needs to be done. I know for a fact that if I only had one of those companies, it could be more profitable. And I've seen that as I've added more companies, it has decreased the profitability of those companies. Again, this could also just be a me problem, right? I'm still learning and growing as an entrepreneur. Right? I still make a lot of mistakes. I still do a lot of things wrong. I'm still learning. And I know there are other entrepreneurs that run multiple companies and they're wildly successful in each of them. But that's been hard for me. I just know, I guess the best way to put it is I know that I am sacrificing revenue for variety. And that's just a choice that I'm making. I know that any one of those businesses could probably do exponentially more if I was only focused on that. But because I don't really want to only focus on that, I split it because, again, like I said, I personally love the variety. I actually like the challenge. I like having different work to do using different parts of my brain. And so I, in my position, am willing to sacrifice some revenue potential for the sake of getting to kind of dabble and have my hand in a variety of things that are all life-giving for me. So that is, I'm not saying that that's a guaranteed thing that you're going to have to sacrifice if you decide to have multiple companies, but common sense would say you're probably going to make some sacrifices for the sake of variety. So that is just the reality of what the toll that decision takes, or the cost of that decision of running multiple businesses in 16 hours a week. And I hope that there's something in that, whether you're building your own business and you're trying to scale back the amount of time you're actually working in it, or you're considering adding another business to your portfolio, right? Maybe you're like, hey, I really want to start to do more of this. And you're just trying to figure out how in the world you would balance that. I hope that there is something in there, either in what's working or what hasn't been working, that is instructive for you and something that you can kind of take and use. So thanks for letting me be honest here. Listen, I'm still making decisions that will shape the future of this podcast. I'm still going to be testing different types of content. And if you have liked this episode that kind of pulls back the behind the scenes and gives you a little more just practical wisdom that I've gained over 20 years of entrepreneurship, then would you let me know by leaving a quick review, right? Just take 2 minutes of your time. And if this has been helpful, make sure that you let me know. And if you have any questions about topics or things that have come up for you while you've been listening to this, if there's questions that you have or topics that you'd really like to see me talk about in the future, you can leave that in the review as well. That would be enormously helpful for me, just as I'm kind of building out how to make this podcast as valuable as possible and kind of just testing different things. So that is the behind the scenes of what's working and what is not working as a 16-hour CEO. I hope that there's been something in that really helps you with knowing a better way to build whatever it is that you are building. All right. I will catch you on our next episode. I hope that you have a absolutely fantastic day.